Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulika al-Kareem. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Allahumma lakal hamdu ala ma anamta bihi alayna min tanzil al-Qur'an. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Bismillah. We begin inshallah by thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has allowed us to gather again this morning to reflect on one very particular aspect of the Surah Fatiha, which we started last time, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. These three first ayahs were one section, and then as the Hadith Qudsi said, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een is the in-between ayah. And if you recall, last time we were discussing some aspects of Iyyaka na'budu. We haven't done Iyyaka nasta'een. But I had not completed what Razi has mentioned in this. And I was very struck by this. He doesn't really say this, but because it happens quite often to us, our children ask, why do we have to worship? Why do we have to pray? After all, you tell us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as-samad, He doesn't need anything, so why does He ask us to pray? And sometimes our reactions are not really appropriate because we get angry or we are shocked. My children are asking these questions, and it's quite amazing to see that this is not something that is happening now. I don't know if Razi knew that our children are going to ask these questions or not, but I mean, these are legitimate questions in the time and in the age in which we are living. So don't be shocked, don't get angry. If these questions are sincere questions, then we can provide answers to them based on knowledge that our tradition has. But obviously we need to know ourselves, what does it mean? Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een. So we said that Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een is you alone we worship. And you alone, Iyyaka is you alone. There is a hasr in it, hasr and ta'een. These are two aspects of Iyyaka. Hasr is demarcation. When you have a boundary wall, so it's very specific, meaning you alone. So the English translations sometimes have alone and sometimes they don't have. You alone we worship, and you alone from whom you are the only, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only being from whom we seek help. You alone, Iyyaka. Iyyaka, we went into some details of it, but we didn't really do na'budu. And this is the question that our children may ask. What is worship? Iyyaka na'budu, and we worship you. You alone, we worship. So that's our focus today. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to move on to Iyyaka nasta'een, then we will go on to nasta'een. Are there any questions at this stage? Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een. You alone. So we did alone parts, like the specification part, last week. Na'budu is from abada. Ain ba and dal. And it's a very fundamental Quranic term, and it would be very helpful if we understand it once and for all, and clarify for ourselves what does it mean to be the abd. Abada is a state of, so the English translation of abd is sometimes misunderstood. It's translated as we are your servants, we are your slaves. Slave is a better word than servant. And the slavehood is something that our egos immediately raise, I'm a slave. Islam is my religion demands that I be a slave. And the word slave has connotations, obviously, in English language, but in Arabic, if we don't have those connotations, can you just open those doors, please? Okay. If we don't have those connotations of slave as in English language, and we have the real term abd, that does not remove, linguistically, it does not remove this connotation of being in a lowly state. In fact, Raghib al-Asfahani, our dear Raghib al-Asfahani, we always go to him, just a wonderful scholar. He says, Al-Abudiyya izharu tadhallul wal-ibada ablagu minha li'annaha ghayatul tadhallul. This is beautiful. He says that Al-Abudiyya is the expression, manifestation of being lowly. And Al-Ibadah is more eloquent from Al-Abd, Al-Abudiyya, because the whole concept, the whole purpose of Ibadah is to actually express in reality that state of servanthood or slavehood. And he says, وَلَا يَسْتَحِقَّهَا إِلَّا مَنْ لَا غَايَةُ الْإِفْضَالِ وَهُوَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى وَلِهَذَا قَالَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. This is so important to realize that this extreme expression of servitude, of being in a state of total servitude, can only be, logically speaking, can only be for the being who has the extreme state of existence. Yani, there could not be any being, Raghib says, to whom a human being would show servitude, slavehood, except to the most exalted, the only one, Allah ta'budu illa iyyahu. Don't be in a state of abd except Allah. So this one single servitude, as Iqbal said in this beautiful couplet as well, this one single servitude, this relationship that we can establish with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of being his slave, releases us from all other slavehoods. And by necessity, anything that has been created, any being, any existent thing that has any kind of need, is in a state of servitude. And these corporations, they take us, they make us their slaves. But what is so we have to understand what is the definition of slave. A slave is the one who has lost his control over his life, time, money, etc. Slave is somebody whose freedom has been taken away. So people who willingly, consciously, and happily become the slaves of a corporation and their jobs or whatever, and they say we don't want to be slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though that one state of abd releases us from all other, because when we say we are your slaves, we are your abid, abd is further lowly state, then what happens? He says there are two things that happen after that. We actually establish a relationship. This relationship is defined by being the abd. Being the abd. Ibadur Rahman, the slaves of Allah. We being the abd, meaning we have relationships as human beings, we have relationships with other human beings of some kind. We define friendship, we define parent, children relationship, father, mother, everything is in relationship. One cannot live, a human being cannot come into this world without a relationship, because there is a relationship of the womb. A child we cannot be without that relationship, right? We came into existence through a relationship. Isn't that amazing? We come in, nobody can be born without a relationship between a man and a woman in the first place. And once the child is conceived, there is a relationship of the womb. So it is impossible to have no relationship. Number two, he says that if you want to have a relationship, how many slavehoods would you like to have? 1 million or just one? Second thing that's very important to understand is that ibadah, as Raghib started out by saying that al-ibadah is the extreme state of lowliness. And showing, see, the English words are extremely wrong, but there may be other words, better words, but the connotations of servitude, of slavehood. But in Arabic, al-ibadah means worship, or we translate it as worship, but it's not literally worship. It is from the same root, therefore this is the this is the more eloquent form of being the abd. So al-ibadah, we call it worship. But is that right or not? So al-ibadah, let's make it our own. Abd is the state of relationship. It defines a relationship, right? Employee and employed, this is a relationship. Abd is a relationship between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all human beings. Ibadah is the expression of that relationship. And that expression is of two kinds. Ibadah bil-taskhir and ibadah bil-ikhtiyar. This is very, very important, because this is a key Quranic term, so we are going to spend some time on it, so that we don't just say we worship you. Iyyaka na'budu, in our salah, we say Iyyaka na'budu, Iyyaka nasta'in, khalas, then we don't pay attention to it. Now, we want to make this word our own. We want to understand it, so that next time we are standing in salah, we say Iyyaka na'budu, we actually mean, what do we mean? We mean that we are actually right this moment in a state of manifestation of that relationship through this ibadah. Iyyaka na'budu. We are saying, you alone, we have a relationship. You and I have a relationship. We are standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in salah, and we're saying we have a relationship. We are acknowledging that relationship. And because there are two kinds of ibadah, wal ibadah darban, there are two kinds. Number one, ibadah bit taskhir, wa ibadah bil ikhtiyar, wa hiya ziwal li zawil nutqa. Now, this is extremely important to understand, that every existent thing is in a state of servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tawwan or karhan, willingly or Karhan. Karhan is a very interesting word. La ikraha fi din, they say there is no coercion in religion. The modernist Muslims try to say, well, Islam is okay. You don't have to. There is freedom of choice. No, la ikraha fi din, yani ibadah, every existent being is in a state of servitude, either willingly or karhan. Karhan meaning here existentially. This tree cannot exist on its own. This cat does not exist on its own. Nobody can exist, no being can exist on its own, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given ikhtiyar, has given a freedom of choice to insan, to human beings and to jinn. So he says, Ebudu Rabbakum, be the abd, do the ibadah for your Rabb. Wa'budullah, and say, be the ibadah of Allah. So there is a very beautiful transference here from the creations who are in the state of servitude without proclaiming it. And us, human beings, who have been given this freedom to say, Ashhadu la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. So, those who do not want to say this, and they say, we are not in a state of servitude, we are not going to have worship, we are not going to do ibadah, why would we go through all this hardship of waking up 3 o'clock in the morning? And like, why do you want us to? You don't need this. If there is God, he doesn't need this. So the answer is that if we are honest, and if we say that we are in a state of this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of being the abd, and he tells us what to do, then do we have a choice? A slave does not have a choice, right? We define definition of it. Now, in this case, there is one relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he does not need our servitude. Every other master would have a need, right? The plantations, the corporation, every other relationship. It's inconceivable to think of any other relationship where the other party would not derive some benefit from the slave. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who derives no benefit whatsoever. So why would he ask us to do this? So really, that's a question that we should be able to answer. If it doesn't arise in our minds, and we know it arises in our children's minds, so we should be able to answer. So we are going to, inshallah, answer this question. So before we can answer the question, we have to understand the 4 kinds of slaves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran. And then we can further understand it. So number 1, there is a mention of al-abd bil-abd. Wa-abdan mamlukan la yaqdiru ala shay. There is a mention in the Quran of a ordinary kind of slave, like slave trade. And people say, well, slavery has been abolished, right? Where has it been abolished? It just changed forms. It hasn't been abolished. This is just on paper, right? We don't have Africans being transported anymore, but we still have slavehood. We still have slavery everywhere. Everywhere in the world there is slavery. So this is the mention of al-abd. So real slavery relationship. Number 2, I said 4 kinds. Number 2, Al-abdu bil-ijad. This is Raghib, defining 4 kinds of slaves. First is the real, right? The second, al-abd bil-ijad, yani the slave that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. Meaning this is the kind we were talking about before. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in a state of abudiyah, in a state of slavehood. Whether we acknowledge it or not is a different question. So this is ذَلِكَ لَيْسَ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ. This cannot be for anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِن كُلُّ مَنْ فِي السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ إِلَّا آتِ الرَّحْمَنِ عَبْدًا. There is none in the samawat or in the earth, on the skies and the, except they all come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as abd, as slaves. Number 3, abdun bil ibada wal khidma wal nasi fi hadha darban. You see this. The third kind is through khidma and ibadah, through service. This third kind is through service and through ibadah. And this is a very noble, very high station. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned there are 2 kinds. Within this third kind, there are 2 kinds. Hada darban. Abdun lillahi mukhlis, wa huwa al-maqsood bi qawlihi wazkur abdana Ayyub. Now, a slave who is absolutely, totally devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is not a single iota of anything going here and there. And this is the state of Ayyub alayhi salam. Wazkur abdana Ayyub. Now, Iqbal said this too, mashallah. I keep remembering Iqbal today. He said that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls you his abd, that is very different from you calling yourself, I'm the abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your claim is just your claim with your tongue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement is a matter of fact that wazkur abdana Ayyub. Innahu kana abdan shakura. Look at that. Innahu kana abdan shakura. He was a thankful slave. And then he raised the station of the Prophet ﷺ by saying, Nazzal al-Furqān ala abdihi. Surah al-Furqan. He sent down the Qur'an upon his abd. Ala abdihi al-kitab. Inna ibadi laysa laka alayhim sultan. Kunu ibadan li. Illa ibadaka minhum al-mukhlasin. Wa ar-Rahmani ibadahu bil-ghayb. Wa ibadu ar-Rahman allazina yamshuna ala ardil hawna. فأسري بعبادي ليلا فوجد عبدا من عبادنا. Right? So this is the slavehood of, this is one of the 2 kinds within the third category. These are the 2 kinds. The first kind. The second of the third category is it's still a good station, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Laysa kullu insanin abdan lillahi. That every insan, every human being is not the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In reality, like by choice. They are also existentially, but one category is of those who have attained the station of ikhlas to the extent that they are beyond the station of seeking any kind of reward and punishment. And this was one of the questions last time. The state of worship, state of ibadah, when we are doing the ibadah without fear of punishment and without seeking Jannah. And I had responded personally to the question that that's a very high station. Like when you are when you are worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you say, I'm not doing this for Jannah. I'm not doing this to save myself from the fire. I am beyond these two needs. I'm just doing it for your sake. That's a very high station. Are there any among us? Yani, we are by nature ibad. So the Prophet ﷺ said that Ta'isa Abdu Dirham, Ta'isa Abdu Dinar. The Abdu Dirham, Abdu Dinar, the slave of the dirham and dinar, we can say slave of the dollars. Ta'isa has just killed himself or destroyed himself. So the fourth kind is abid. What's mentioned in the Quran, the fourth kind, ma'ana bizallamin lil abid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not oppress, does not do zulm on his abid. So abid is more intense. Is that clear? There are four kinds of mention. So once we have understood, let's go to Razi now. And there are, he doesn't really ask this specific question that why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to worship him, but because this question is there, the answer he provides relate to this question. What is it that, why is it that he has asked us to worship? So we worship. Are there any questions at this stage? If there is anything before we move forward, please just ask. Otherwise, there are 7 benefits of Iyyaka na'budu, just Iyyaka na'budu. So we are going to, now we have understood the slave part. Now we are going to say, understand.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Dr. Sahab, I have a question.
Yes.
And this has bothered me for a long time. We use the term slave, and in journal, the slave is a very negative term. Like you have enslaved somebody by force, right? So slavery is usually associated by force. And slaves do not get reimbursed in actual sense. I mean, they are given food maybe, but they are treated bad and they don't get reimbursed. So when we use the word slave, and I've been thinking, wouldn't it be the better word to say the submitter who willingly do it?
So when we started, I don't know if you were there at the beginning, when I started out, I did say that the English connotations of the word slave and servitude are extremely negative because we cannot, we have no sacredness associated with the word slave and servitude. But I said that when we use the word abd, that suddenly transforms into a very high station. So it is the semantics of the language. Each language has its own associated concepts attached to it. Because in the English language, slave and slavehood and slavery have always been of this first of the 4 categories that are mentioned in the Quran, which is just plain slavery. And that is a very lowly station, that is oppression and all of that. But we can discuss the translation issue some other time, or we don't even need to use slavery or slave, but when we're talking using English, we have to have some word, and submitter is not the translation of abd. That is a Muslim. Salama, that is a different connotation. Abd literally means slavehood. In Arabic, it literally means to be in a relationship of servitude, and as Raghib just defined it, it is to show humility. by definition, the word itself is to show, to be in a state of humility, and that's how he says that there is literally no existent who is not in this state of servitude. And then he defines servitude and slavehood to be perpetually dependent on the master. And in human terms, obviously, as you said, we enslave people, but in the Quranic sense, all existent beings are slaves by the very fact of their having been created in perpetual state of need. Nothing can exist nothing can exist independently. Everything is in a state of servitude, and that servitude is also connected with a state of perpetual glorification of the master. تُسَبِّحُ لَهُ السَّمَاوَاتُ السَّبْعُ وَالْأَرْضُ وَمَنْ فِيهِنَّ. Everything in the samawat, in the 7 samawat, and on earth is tusabbihu, glorifies or does tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa im min shayin illa yusabbihu bihamdihi. There is not a thing anywhere except illa yusabbihu bihamdihi, except that it is doing tasbih. وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ حَلِيمًا غَفُورًا. But you don't understand their tasbih. So this is a very, very, very deep topic, and inshallah we can get better understanding by looking at these 7 aspects of Iyyaka na'budu, 7 benefits from Iyyaka na'budu. The first is al-ibada, عبارة عن الفعل الذي يؤتي به لغرض تعظيم الغير. The manifestation of this state of being abd is ibadah. It is an action which is performed for glorification of the one for whom we are performing it. وَهُوَ مَأْخُوذٌ مِنْ قَوْلِهِمْ طَرِيقَ مَعْبَدٍ. And this we understand through the following. We say, Iyyaka na'budu. We are in the state of ibadah only and only for you. Because this is also, look at how beautiful this is, that in one way it is the manifestation of our lowliness. Simultaneously, it is a manifestation of the magnification. Ta'zim is the magnification of the one in front of whom we are standing. So we are being lowly, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the being towards whom our lowliness is directed. So he says that this is hasr, yani this is extreme state of servitude, but it can only be for the one who deserves it, and it cannot be for anyone else. And the most and the most and the greatest reason is that he is the one who has created us. We were nothing. وَقَدْ خَلَقْتُكَ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَلَمْ تَكُ شَيْئًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I created you and you were nothing. So our very existence depends on the one in whose ibadah we are standing. كَيْفَ تَكْفُرُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَكُنْتُمْ أَمْوَاتًا فَأَحْيَاكُمْ. How can you deny Allah because you were dead and He gave you life? هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. Yani he's the one who created. ثم استوى إلى السماء فسوهن سبع سماوات وهو بكل شيء عليم. So all of these ayahs, when we say إياك نعبد, we are actually doing this because we were nothing, and he's the one who created us, and we are glorifying, and this is the act of magnification. Number two, this is also very important because the second reason is that he not only created us, he also created the means through which our life is existing. So our magnification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not really is in the sense of slavehood. It is in the sense of slavehood, but in addition to that, in the sense of magnification of the one who brought us into existence, who is supporting our existence through ijad, through the creation of all the resources which we need. Now, this is very important because in this surah, how many names are there of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to whom we are saying Iyyaka na'budu? We said 5. Do you remember what 5 names are? Allah, Ar-Rabb, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, wa Maliki Yawmiddin. There are 5 descriptions. Allah is the Ism Zat, wa Rabb, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, wa Maliki Yawmiddin. Now, well, Abd, you and me, every Abd has 3 states: past, present, and future. Now, our past, what is our past? In this dunya, what is our past? We didn't exist. He brought us into existence. What is our present? We are perpetually in need. What is our future? There are only 2 places we are going to go. We need him to go to the right place. So, state of the Abd, number 1 in the past, وَقَدْ خَلَقْتُكَ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَلَمْ تَكُ شَيْئًا. We were nothing, he created us. The present is perpetual stage of being in need of Rabbil Alameen. We have pressing needs, right? When we did not exist, then we are in existence, and then we say we need a Rabb, we need the Rabubiyah, we need the sustainer, and then we need the mercy, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, and the future is Maliki Yawmiddin. So in this way, the 5 names or attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the surah are connected with the 3 states of the human being. This is, it's also directly answering your question as well, because the servitude is, he says, lowly and humiliating state. But the higher the status and nobility of the master, the more that servitude is agreeable and dignified. And since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the mightiest of all, therefore this relationship is of the highest magnitude and dignity. So the word, we are just emptying the content of the word slavery, if we can. Otherwise, we just use the word abd. We are preoccupied all the time with our needs, whether we are conscious of those needs or not, but we are preoccupied with those needs by definition. even the act of breathing, without which we cannot exist. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises the stations of his ibad, and those who transgress, they are still, by definition, they are still his ibad. Nothing can be outside this relationship. But those who deny that, فَجَعَلَ الْأَرْضَ فَوْقَهَا وَخُسِفَ بِقَارُونَ. So Razi gives the example of Qarun, who had all the wealth of this dunya. Like he is proverbially the richest person. And what happened to him? He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just put it under the earth. He was just buried. وَرَفَعَ مُحَمَّدٌ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ فَجَعَلَ قَابَ قَوْسَيْنِ تَحْتَهُ. And he raised his abd, Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, to the station of Qaba Qawsain, so near to himself. وَجَعَلَ الْمَالَ نَارًا عَلَى قَوْمِ فِرْعَوْنَ وَأَغْرَقُوا فَادْخُلُوا نَارًا وَجَعَلَ النَّارَ بَرْدًا وَسَلَامًا عَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ. And he made the fire for Fir'aun, and he made the fire cool for his abd Ibrahim alayhi salam. So these are some of the benefits, first level of benefit. Now the second benefit, Iyyaka na'budu. Just the second benefit of Iyyaka na'budu. Al-Faidatu, second benefit. The second benefit of saying Iyyaka na'budu is that because there is hasr, because there is demarcation, we say only you we worship. We are only in this relation with only you. That means ثَبَّتَ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا. We are simultaneously acknowledging Tawheed. When we say only you, we worship you. There is none worthy of worship, meaning we are simultaneously benefiting by attesting that Iyyaka na'budu as opposed to the mushrikeen, because mushrikeen also did the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The mushrikeen, the polytheists, they worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? But what did they do? They worship others as well. When we say Iyyaka, in the Iyyaka is the hasr, is the demarcation that we are saying none other. And then there are people who are worshipping the sun and the moon, and he gives the example of the Majus and others. There are still people in this dunya in this 21st century who worship sun. I've seen one worshipping the sun. Now, Faidatu Thalitha, the third benefit. We did this last time. Iyyaka na'budu. We went through this last time. Iyyaka is before na'budu, right? Remember that? We said that Allah subhanahu in this ayah, Iyyaka na'budu is you is before na'budu. You alone we worship. Instead of saying we worship you. There's a difference between, and he says there are lots of benefits in saying, bringing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before ourselves. When we say you first, we are addressing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are putting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before ourselves. But the question then he raises is, this mind is so beautiful. Why not I worship? You're just standing by yourself. You're saying Surah Al-Fatiha by yourself. You should say, you alone I worship. But why is nabudu instead of abudu? So this is the part where one of the scholars said that Razi is so bold that sometimes he suggests to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what he should put in the Qur'an. He says, why not? The answer he gives is beautiful, though. He says that by mentioning Iyaka, mentioning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before ourselves, we are benefiting, and all of this is for our own benefit. We are benefiting tremendously because we bring to our consciousness, we bring to our heart the one we are worshipping instead of ourselves. So that removes any danger of shaitan saying, oh, you are great. Look, you are worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at 4 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock at night. You are great. If we say, I worship you, I, right? Me. Number 2, he says that when you say na'budu instead of abudu, if you say we worship you instead of I worship you, you are maybe including the angels with you. And that is for your benefit, because now you are saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I am worshiping you, but the angels are also worshiping with me. Please accept my supplication. Number 3, he says, maybe your worship is lacking, it's not good enough. You are just thinking about your business while you are doing salah. But when you say nabudu, you are including all the people who are doing salah at this time on this earth. And therefore, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, okay, you are short, but look at this one. So you are just, he says, when you go to a place and you are in a group of people and you are short, your qualifications are not, you just slip in. So if you want to go to Jannah, just be in the benefit, in the company of those who are in a better state than your own state. So the benefit then continues. It says that Iyaka na'budu has a benefit of raising ourselves to the station of actually deriving surur, joy, from standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a very high station. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the tawfiq to be in the state that our ibadah is not hardship, but a state of joy. And when we say na'budu and we gain the consciousness that we are not lonely standing here at 2 o'clock in the morning, but there is the entirety of the cosmos and the beings in it, and we are part of that, that just raises you to a level of companionship with the highest companions possible. And that is a joy, he says, for the true believers. So the question, I'm going to finish with that question, which I didn't answer last time. And Razi actually has that question and answer. So he says there are the 3 levels of those who stand in worship. The first, worship hoping for reward and fearing punishment. The second, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the honor of worshipping him or the honor of receiving his commands. And the third, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because he is the Lord and the Creator. And these, and the person in that station says, I am just your servant, I am just your abd, I don't ask anything, you know everything that I need, I don't even have to ask you, I'm just in this relationship with you, you take care of everything, I'm not even going to ask you anything, I don't. So he says, this is great. Inshallah, we stop here. There are two more benefits left. Are there any questions? There's one in the chat.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Sorry, if you're answering the chat question, you can go ahead and
No, there is no. It just says thank you. There is no question.
Okay. The question is, when you explained about what iyaka entails, some of the explanation Razi Rahimahullah says is about including angels and animals. Since the surah introduces Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Rabbul Alameen, as you earlier explained, as Alameen is everything other than Allah, is it also inclusive of every creation other than Allah? And astaghfirullah, every creation of Allah?
Sorry, say it again.
The question is around the iyaka. Who all are included in the iyaka?
No, iyaka is just you alone. We are addressing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Sorry, not
it's the
iyaka,
nabudu.
sorry.
It's the nabudu part.
Yeah, nabudu part. Sorry about that. Nabudu part, in that, who all are we including in that nabudu? For example, in the explanation that you gave, Imam Razi's explanation, he says malaika and possibly all human beings.
All ibad, all other ibad. Nabudu.
Is that inclusive of every creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Every creation, he said that there are two kinds of ibadah. One is bil taskhir and one is bil ikhtiyar. One is existential ibadah. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in that ayah that we just mentioned, that there is none in the samawat or the earth. Tusabbihu lahu samawatu sabu wal ardu wa man fihinna wa im min shay'in illa yusabbihu bihamdihi walakin la tafqahuna tasbihahum. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there is none in existence of his creation who is not doing ibadah or tasbih, which is very interesting because we know human beings who don't even acknowledge that there is a creator. But the answer is that their statement with their mouth is just their statement with their tongue. In reality, their whole being is in a state of servitude. Their heart, their lungs, every single atom of their being has knowledge, is in servitude. This iron that is in their body circulating and making hemoglobin, iron, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent it down, and iron knows. So all the elements, likewise mountains, likewise trees, animals. So when we say na'budu, in that category of taskhir, ibadah bit taskhir, servitude by taskhir, which is taskhir is being subservient. So we are including everybody. So the answer is yes. At that level, we are nabudu. Razi says we are including every single existent. We are bringing ourselves together in that slavehood, in that servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, acknowledging and knowing and being part of the entirety of creation. Is that?
Jazakallah khair. Yeah, it explains. Jazakallah.
ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. يا الله أنت حليم كريم عظيم تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا رب العالمين. فاعف عنا اللهم يا شافي اشفي صدورنا وبطوننا من كل داء يا رب العالمين. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.